It dawned on me that ahead of Oklahoma traveling to the Grove to play Ole Miss, that is not just Oklahoma at a crossroads. It's also the Rebels. And I feel confident in saying this, but first I want to talk about what Oklahoma is up against and then talk about what Ole Miss is up against and see how you can see how I'm getting to this point where I think both teams are playing for a lot in game number 8 of the season. So Oklahoma fired the offensive coordinator on Sunday, elevated Joe John Finley from the co-offensive coordinator position to the full-time offensive coordinator position, and went from offensive analyst Kevin Johns to quarterbacks coach Kevin Johns. And the starting quarterback will be Jackson Arnold, one of 2 starting quarterbacks that Oklahoma's had this year, and both of those guys have won football games. Here of late, Michael Hawkins Jr. has not looked great at holding on to the football and not throwing the ball to the other team, and Jackson Arnold can do that just fine too and might be a more talented guy. We've gone from Jackson Arnold's not the guy to Michael Hawkins is the guy to Michael Hawkins is not the guy, back to Jackson Arnold's got another opportunity to be the guy. And with Oklahoma sitting at 4-3, there's still quite a season to salvage here. But you still need to find 2 wins on this loaded schedule to get to bowl eligibility. I believe that Oklahoma is going to beat Maine. I don't know that the Black Bears are going to be putting money in the bag against the Sooners. But I got to tell you, that happens. It's all up in the air for Oklahoma, and that includes Brent Venables. I think Brent Venables is pretty close to safe. As safe as you can get being 4-3 given the putrid state of the offense going into this game against Ole Miss. But you got to get this win against Ole Miss. You got to get a win against Missouri. You still got LSU on the back end, right? There's a lot here for Oklahoma to still navigate through to try to get to 6 wins to bowl eligibility and then see what's left if there is anything left. And right now, Ole Miss feels like a game that Oklahoma can win because of what Ole Miss has shown so far in this SEC season. After beating up on their non-conference competition, right? Talk about stomping out Furman, stomping out Middle Tennessee, and stomping out Wake Forest. They have faltered against opponents in the SEC, right? The first loud trip was against Kentucky, a game in which Lane Kiffin walked in the post-game press conference and was going, how does this happen? How does this happen to us, right? At a time when Vanderbilt upsets number 1 Alabama. Couldn't really put that one down. And if you're an Ole Miss fan or Ole Miss alumnus who has given money to that name, image, and likeness collective, you want to know how this could happen too. And then it became even more dire with the loss to LSU because now you got not just 2 losses, but 2 losses in SEC play. We think that there is going to be at least 1 2-loss team from the SEC into the college football playoff. But if Ole Miss wants that team to be them, they're going to have to win out the rest of the way, and they're going to probably have to do it in something like some style and hope that LSU turns out to be really good and Kentucky turns out to be pretty good so they can hold up those losses as being quality opponents that they faced. However, Ole Miss spent $10 million on the roster that it has today. This comes from David Ubben, who has a really good piece in The Athletic talking about what it takes to compete at the sharp end of, well, trying to make the college football playoff. And what is more important, I think, about the $10 million that Ole Miss spent as opposed to, say, the $20 million that Ohio State spent is Ole Miss looked at 2024 not unlike you might think Ohio State looked at 2014. You know you got a good football program. You know you have a program that at least on paper is capable of winning the national championship. You also understand that the first year of the playoff is going to be the most important year of that particular playoff era because everybody's figuring it out at the same time. After year 1, some things become canon and fall into place. So Ohio State can lose to Virginia Tech, still make the college football playoff, and win the national championship. And from there, Ohio State has basically been in that conversation for most years, right? We got to look hard at a bad Ohio State year. And a bad Ohio State year is basically 2023, right? Where you lose to Michigan, you don't play for the Big Ten championship, and you lose in the Cotton Bowl to Missouri. It's a bad Ohio State year. That is the floor for what we expect from an Ohio State team. That is the floor that Ole Miss is trying to achieve, but you can't do that if you're not one of the 12 teams in the college football playoff, for which we expect Ohio State will most definitely be one of them if they just keep up their end, right? They beat everybody else that they play, and they should. They'll get to the Big Ten championship game and have an opportunity to avenge the loss they have against Oregon. They take another loss to Oregon. Maybe they still get in, maybe they don't. We'll see. But for Ole Miss, spending this amount of money at a program that has never won a national championship in the modern era, and a program that won 11 games for just the first time last year, you're really getting toward the upper reaches of what you know how to do. So you spend $10 million over the course of this roster, but also let's think about what they did 2023 when they went to go get Trey Harris from Louisiana Tech. Turns out to be he is the most productive wide receiver in the SEC. Is he the best wide receiver? Debatable. I think Luther Burden's got something to say about that, as does Ryan Williams, but the point is there, right? You lose Quinshon Judkins to Ohio State, but it's okay because Henry Parrish Jr. has been pretty good, right? You also have been adding to that defense to try to make them into a team that is balanced, right? You're not just offensively trying to outscore people. You have a Walter Nolan. You have a Princely Uman-Millen. You have guys that we know about. And say nothing of Jackson Dart going into what we think is supposed to be a first-round draft pick year for him. But now that you have these losses against Kentucky and LSU, your back is against the wall. And if Oklahoma can walk into the Grove and hand you an L, not only does that bode well for Oklahoma, it torpedoes any chance that Ole Miss will make the college football playoff. So while on a national level, this $10 million doesn't seem like a lot, right? It's a lot of money. Let me put that another way. It's a lot of money. But when you're talking about Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, I don't think it's that much. As a matter of fact, I thought it was really cool of Walker Jones, who runs the collective at Ole Miss, to say that, we probably rank in the top half of the SEC in the amount of money that we spend on the roster. There are 16 teams in the SEC, right? Off the top of my head, Alabama, Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, probably Oklahoma, quiet as it's kept. They spend a lot of money. And then LSU, they spend a lot of money, right? A&M, they spend a lot of money. So you probably, right? Probably. You're probably outspending Auburn, Mississippi State, so forth. And the gifts that continue to come in result from two things. Either you have an alumni base that is super tired of getting beat down or being middling, say Texas A&M for that matter, or an alumni base that has decided this is the time and the time is now to try to go do this thing. Ohio State, right? Now, sometimes losing to your rival can really expedite that process like it has with Ohio State. But I think with Ole Miss, it's more like, are we ever going to be good enough to make the tournament? And if we are good enough to make the tournament, and we think we are we going to be good enough to win it? And when you play in the SEC, one of the great things about it is if you can win in that conference, you can win anywhere else. Nobody else is going to test you. Not really, right? Outside of a great Ohio State or Michigan when they're great, the upper echelon, Oregon this year, the two, number one, number two, number three teams in the Big Ten, the number one, number two team in the Big 12, the number one, number two team in the ACC, you're not really going to get tested. Will there be a Clemson that jumps up and bites you? Probably, right? Because that's what Clemson does. Maybe Miami's that team this year. It doesn't look like it, but they feel like it. That's where you want to be. So if you're Ole Miss and you're looking up and you see Iowa State makes college football playoff before you do, or you see, Lord help you, BYU or Colorado make the playoff before you do, which are things that can happen. Or I pointed out Miami. Duke has got one loss. SMU has got one loss. There are lots of teams still in this thing. Boise State, UNLV, probably going to be one of those two teams representing the group of five. Are you going to be able to stomach this and come back with more of your hard-earned money to give to this program that hasn't done enough yet to show you that it's capable of winning? That is why a game like this one against a blue blood like Oklahoma, even one that's down, is so meaningful to them right now. You got to get this win, and you probably need to get it by a couple of touchdowns, while Oklahoma needs to get this win to salvage anything like self-esteem and to give itself a nice purchase to try to figure out how to get at least one more win, if not get to, dare I say it, 8-4, 7-5 by the end of the year. And that is exactly how many people thought it was going to go for Oklahoma, right? Has it gone that way in the way that they thought it would? No. Nobody thought that the offense would be damn near dead last in football, let alone in the SEC. And yet they're still 4-3. So if you get something figured out against Ole Miss in this defense, it feels like the defense at Oklahoma might still be good enough to win you some football games. All of that is going to get tested on Saturday at 11 a.m. at the Grove, and yours truly will be watching it.